Okay, so let's make a start. So welcome everyone. Quadrant Community Goal, date is February 13th, 2024. See, we've got a couple of items on the agenda, starting with Didi and the release process. Didi, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Paul. So this is actually a good opportunity since we have a bunch of epics that, since of course this doesn't have visibility in those epics, it's kind of like an internal, but it's going to be kind of setting up the factory that is going to allow us to push all the releases forward and in a unified way. And one of the things that probably is the most important, it is that everyone's going to have the knowledge on how to do so and follow the process. There are basically two RFCs, and I linked in the document both of the pull requests. One, it is the actual event of releasing Kuadrant, what it means, the ways of communication, the process of handover to other teams, and many other aspects about that particular event, which is releasing Kuadrant, all the components of Kuadrant, and what we mean by that, and what versioning and whatnot. And the other one is more about the pipeline, the actual processes that makes possible to have these deliverables, which could be, they're like basically images and the manifests. And that is also very important. That is going to have like the actual pipeline that will make it possible to have these images, these artifacts from the release. I wanted to put some emphasis on this because on the last release that we needed to patch, it was only just a few people that they had the know-how, and it was possible to do it under 24 hours because the people that were there at that moment knew how to. So this probably is going to be good for the whole team, and it's going to be also more transparent in the way that we do these kind of processes. So it's just, I wanted just to push it forward and see if we can close it. I'll have like all the feedback. And now, especially that we're going to have like integrated, and I probably need to do some changes since the DNS and the TLS policies are going to be included in Kuadrant Codebase. So, and pretty much that's it. Not sure if anyone has some, yeah, go ahead, Paul.
Hey, Didi, feel free to tell me to read the RFCs and come back to you afterwards. But at a high level, how automatable is this process? How quickly do we think we can turn around releases based on what's being proposed?
So one of the things that we need to agree on is not about like implementing, but being agreed that we all of us were on the same page and that we have documented what we mean about like releasing. And the other one, the technical aspect of it, is going to probably, the implementation is going to take some time. But we can do some patches and as well documented that, so everyone knows how to do as the current process is. It is also documented, the current process, and also the ideal process or the next process. So far, better from QA, and I think there is like Alex and some other people that I got some feedback from Guy as well. But it's two things, basically, understand the current process and how anyone can actually release with the current process. And then the next process, actually the future, how we're going to implement it in the future. It doesn't matter how much time it's going to take, but at least it's going to be kicked off, and the current process is going to do for the time being. But implementing that probably is going to take a couple of weeks.
A couple of weeks is pretty good from my side.
And yes, Guy?
Is there any decision that needs to be made on the discussions going on currently in those two RFCs that we could turn here into an action item of any kind?
At this stage, with the feedback that I got, probably, like the kind of feedback about the release process of the event of release, the number 46, that is pretty much, like that we understand, or is something that we need to, if we are okay with the things listed and the components and the versioning and how we are handing over and all of those things, it's like, just give me the okay, or suggest something that needs to be addressed in particular. But if the description of the release event, it is okay and it makes sense and it sounds, the channel of communications, the handing over and all other stuff listed in that RFC are okay, actually the okay and the comments will be enough. On the other hand, on the technical aspects of it, and there is no the actual implementation of it, but we need to agree that what we're going to be changing from the current process to the new one are sound as well. And that's probably going to take some more technical details and being more, taking a bit more time to go through that RFC. About the actual items, action items, that we can just describe on this document. More than the review itself, I don't have any.
Yeah, the reason why I mentioned it is because I remember some discussion about trying to find some happy middle between some process that works out for the entire suite, that we can make it as unified or simple as possible, right, in the sense that we do not have multiple ways to achieve the same thing in one hand, and on the other one, something that also reserves, the independency of each one of the components, while they still need to be released independently, right?
Right.
So I think there's some place, some spot in between, sweet spot in between, that we need to find that.
Yeah, true. That is one of the comments that need to be resolved.
Yes.
Yeah.
And another one that I would also recommend is trying to make sure that we capture all the different benefits of having such unified process and yet flexible for all the different stakeholders, right? Such as making sure we do not mix, the need for automation necessarily with some specific process, such as the one that QE has, right? So QE has specific requirements about how those images need to be built and to be made available, just to give you one example, right? And obviously, whatever process we decide needs to support that. At the same time, it needs to be clear that this is not a QE process, or this is not, the productization process for the downstream, for example, just to mention another example, right? This is the process for releasing Kuadrant and Kuadrant component that has a bunch of different requirements for all the different stakeholders.
Yeah, and before I just pass it the word to you, Peter, it is good, Guy, that you mentioned this is not about downstream, it's upstream, and mainly. Peter?
Yeah, I want to chime in on what Guy said. There's correct. There's one pending conversation that needs to be resolved. We talked about it with Guy a few weeks ago. I would say we can go through the comments again and come up with the decision. And if we cannot come up to some decision agreement, then I think we can put it on for the next week community call with more detail. Yeah, I think, like he said, that these two things are the only thing that I'm aware of that needs discussing.
That's good. If anyone has any other questions, if not, I just pass the word to Craig.
I've not really a question, just a thought. As we kind of move more towards that unified quadrant view, where DNS policy and TLS policy moving into quadrant operator, and the DNS operator being a new dependency of the quadrant operator. and some reduced focus, I guess, on the actual OCM integration pieces. Do you anticipate that simplifying the process? Because really the quadrant operator at that point becomes the point of release for everything. Like, I know that like the MG, what we call the MGC, but we'll probably rename it, is kind of separate and released separately. But if we're not putting a huge focus on that, and not a lot is changing, like if it's just the quadrant operator that's releasing, does it? I'm rambling. Does it do you think it simplifies this thing?
I got your meaning. My answer would be that after taking a look at Mike's pull request, I predict it's going to be simplified, at least for people introduced to Kuadrant. They're going to be easier to see all the dependencies and all the artifacts coming from what we call Kuadrant.
Yeah.
And since it's going to be all kind of in the same place, put it just simply. And yeah,
we won't have like a separate policy controller anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. But that doesn't. Does that impact at all on? I need to go read these, but does
But
it
I
impact
need to. So it's going to impact, since that's not just yet reflected into that RFC, which I just wanted to sync with Mike actually to see if this needs to be merged first or not, or if it's actually going to be merged for sure. I could change the RFC directly and don't wait for the merge of that pull request. Guy?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. First, I need to acknowledge that I myself need to go back to the discussion and to refresh my memory on the details. But from the top of my head, I think what you said, Craig, does help simplifying the process. Because if I remember correctly, one of the discussions, or part of the discussion there, is rather if releasing Kuadrant is something that needs to be defined completely independently from releasing the individual components, right? As if Kuadrant or something else on top, right? And it has its own release process and release history. Versus, on the other hand, a scenario where releasing Kuadrant is something that materializes in the release of one particular component. So we kind of pick one component to represent what Kuadrant is. Usually that would be, the component that represents probably the root of the tree of dependencies between the components, right? So if we are simplifying that tree in the sense that now we have less nodes, and the quadrant operator is now back being, the root of that tree, I think that makes it simpler in general.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. I think I would have been concerned if it wasn't the case. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that it sounds like we get to a simple place. Sorry, it's me next, isn't it? This is just for your information for everybody. There is a RFC there from Phil around the DNS work that he's been doing to remove OCM as the dependency for multi-cluster DNS. So feel free to go take a look. There's been some discussion on it already. It's in pretty good shape. But it will probably merge in the next week or so. So if you want to take a look at it and add any comments, now's the time to do that. That's it, really.
Thanks, Craig. Just looking at the backlog, is there anything that anyone wants to raise, or are we happy to postpone? I've got I've got 2 items on that list, but I'm happy to push them back. They're not important. Is there anything else that anyone would like to raise? Okay, well, I guess that's a no. All right, thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Cheers.